Deep in the Kuiper Belt Observatory, Dr. Sarah Chen wasn't expecting anything unusual during her regular scan of the outer solar system. The massive array of radio telescopes had been faithfully monitoring space for decades, mostly picking up the usual cosmic background radiation and occasional pulsar signals. But today was different. "Director Harris," she called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You need to see this." The characteristic shuffle of the director's gait echoed through the control room as he made his way to her station. James Harris had spent 30 years searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, and at 65, he had started to believe he would retire without ever finding what he was looking for. "What have you got, Chen?" he asked, adjusting his glasses as he peered at her monitor. "A structure," she replied, pulling up the enhanced images. "Artificial, about 3 kilometers long. It just appeared at the edge of our detection range. The energy signature is like nothing we've ever seen before." The object on the screen was elegant, a series of crystalline structures arranged in a pattern that couldn't possibly be natural. It was clearly a ship, and it was clearly not human. Within hours, every major space agency and observatory on Earth had confirmed the sighting. The vessel maintained its position just beyond Neptune's orbit, neither advancing nor retreating. After 3 days of careful observation, it made its first move. A signal reached Earth's instruments, complex but clearly intentional. The world's most advanced quantum computers worked tirelessly to decode it, and when they did, the message was surprisingly simple. "Greetings, Sol 3 inhabitants. Standard biological assessment procedure initiating. Please maintain normal activities." The next 48 hours saw the alien vessel methodically scanning the solar system, paying particular attention to Earth and its colonies on Mars and the Moon. The data they were collecting seemed comprehensive. Atmospheric composition, geological activity, biological diversity, and human civilization itself. Dr. Chen worked without rest, analyzing the incoming data they were able to intercept from the alien scans. "They're particularly interested in our biology," she noted, watching as another burst of data streamed across her screen. "They've been spending an unusual amount of time studying our muscular and skeletal structure, our endurance capabilities, our dietary habits." The sudden cessation of all alien activity was so abrupt it took several minutes for anyone to notice. The ship had stopped scanning, its energy signature dropping to nearly nothing. Then, without warning, a new message arrived. "Error. Key classification impossible. Biological parameters exceed known limits. Threat assessment recalibrating." Director Harris leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the screen's glow. "What does that mean?" Before anyone could respond, the alien vessel's energy signature spiked dramatically. A final message broadcast across all frequencies. "Danger alert. Extreme biological divergence. Species Sci-Fi creation. APX Jurated Survival Organism. Quarantine Protocols INITIATED. All vessels avoid Sol system. Repeat. APEXP Radiator World DTCTED. The ship vanished in a burst of energy that briefly outshone Neptune, leaving behind only rapidly fading ripples in space-time and a very confused humanity. In the days that followed, as Dr. Chen and her colleagues analyzed the vast amount of data the aliens had inadvertently left behind in their hasty retreat, a picture began to emerge. The aliens had been conducting what was apparently a routine survey, something they'd done countless times before. But something about humans had terrified them. "Look at this," Dr. Chen said during an emergency meeting of the International Space Council. "They were comparing our biological capabilities to their database of known species. We're classified as something called a persistence predator. Apparently that's extremely rare. Most intelligent species evolved from grazing or scavenging ancestors. But why would that frighten them?" asked the Russian representative. "Because," Director Harris interjected, studying the translated alien data. We're not just persistence predators. We're capable of surviving in almost any environment. We can eat almost anything. We heal from injuries that would kill most species, and we actively seek out new challenges and dangers. To them, we're not just another intelligent species. We're something that shouldn't exist. The revelation sent waves through the scientific community and beyond. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if they would be seen as worthy of joining a galactic community. No one had considered the possibility that they might be seen as too dangerous to interact with. As Dr. Chen stared out her office window at the stars that night, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity's first contact had ended not with invasion or friendship, but with the aliens fleeing in terror. As she began drafting her report for the UN Security Council, she wondered what this meant for humanity's future among the stars. They had finally made contact with alien life, only to discover that they were the ones that went bump in the night. The cosmos, it seemed, had good reason to be afraid of the dark. That's where the humans were. 6 months after the dramatic first contact incident, humanity had made an extraordinary discovery on Mars. During the expanded scanning operations that followed the alien encounter, an automated mining probe had detected an anomaly buried deep within Olympus Mons. What they found would change humanity's understanding of their place in the cosmos forever. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the newly excavated chamber, her helmet lights illuminating walls covered in crystalline data storage units. The facility had been sealed for what preliminary dating suggested was over 50,000 years. Yet, as soon as human presence was detected, the ancient systems had hummed to life, holographic interfaces materializing throughout the chamber. It's some kind of galactic library, she breathed, watching as her tablet processed the alien data streams. The translation algorithms they'd developed from the first contact encounter were proving invaluable. Director Harris, are you seeing this? Through the comlink, Harris's voice crackled with excitement, despite the slight delay from Earth. Every bit, Dr. Chen. It appears to be a backup database, probably part of a network spread throughout the galaxy. The real question is, why was it abandoned? The answer came 3 days later, as the research team began to understand the facility's contents. Dr. Chen was cross-referencing data when she found it. A security alert dated to precisely when the facility had been sealed. They were running from something, she announced during the emergency briefing. The species that built this facility, they called themselves the Archivists. They were conducting a standard survey of Earth during the last ice age when they detected something that terrified them: early humans. The assembled scientists and military officials leaned forward as Dr. Chen projected the translated data. The ancient report filled the room with flowing alien script. Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha. Immediate withdrawal from Sol system required. Native apex predator species displaying signs of emergent intelligence. Projected development trajectory exceeds safety parameters. Species demonstrates unprecedented combination of attributes. Endurance beyond biological norms. Environmental adaptation capabilities exceeding known limits. Pack hunting behaviors combined with tool use. Abstract problem solving during pursuit. Capability to survive and thrive in extreme temperature variations. Classification. Potential Class X civilization. Recommend immediate quarantine and monitoring. They weren't just afraid of what we were, Dr. Chen continued. They were terrified of what we might become. According to their data, most intelligent species evolved in stable, safe environments. Their minds developed first, then they used technology to overcome their physical limitations. But humans, we evolved to survive first, Harris finished. Our intelligence developed alongside our physical capabilities, not in place of them. The database revealed more. Earth was classified as a crucible world, a planet with environmental conditions so harsh that it should have prevented the development of advanced intelligence. Instead, it had produced humans, a species that thrived on challenge and change. The research team discovered entries about other intelligent species in the galaxy. The Archivists themselves had evolved on a world of perpetual spring, with no seasons and minimal environmental pressures. Another prominent species came from a planet of shallow seas and gentle breezes, where their floating gas-filled bodies had never needed to develop robust physical forms. Look at this comparison. Dr. Chen highlighted another data stream. The average intelligent species can run for about 3 minutes before requiring rest. They consider that extreme exercise. A human can jog for hours. We sweat to cool ourselves. Apparently, that's almost unheard of. We can repair broken bones, survive the loss of major organs, and operate in temperature ranges that would kill most species. No wonder they ran, someone muttered. But the most shocking revelation came when they found the threat assessment protocols. The archivists had categories for every type of potentially dangerous species they'd encountered. Humans didn't fit any of them. Instead, they had created an entirely new classification just for Earth. Death World Alpha, a planet that should have been too dangerous to produce intelligent life, yet somehow produced an intelligent species that was even more dangerous than their world. As Dr. Chen compiled her findings, a message arrived from the International Space Council. More ships had been detected at the edges of the solar system. Different designs from the first contact vessel, but clearly artificial. This time, they weren't coming closer to study Earth. They were setting up a perimeter. The quarantine wasn't just a warning. It was being actively enforced. Humanity wasn't just classified as dangerous. They were being contained. But as Dr. Chen studied more of the database, she began to understand something crucial. The aliens weren't just afraid of human physical capabilities. They were terrified of something far more fundamental: humanity's relentless drive to explore, to expand, to overcome challenges. In their billion years of recording galactic history, the archivists had never encountered a species that actively sought out the very things that should have killed them. Humans didn't just survive challenges, they chased them, learned from them, grew stronger because of them. As night fell on Mars, Dr. Chen stood at the entrance of the alien facility, looking up at the stars. The quarantine ships were up there somewhere, watching, waiting. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had left behind the very information humanity needed to understand their place in the cosmos. And if there was one thing that humans did better than survive, it was learn. The observation deck of the International Space Station Beta offered an unparalleled view of both Earth and the alien quarantine line. Dr. Sarah Chen stood there now, watching the distant ships glitter like artificial stars. After 3 months of standoff, the aliens had finally requested a meeting. "They're terrified of letting us leave our solar system," Director Harris said, floating beside her. Now the head of the newly formed Human-Alien Relations Division, he'd aged years in the past few months. "But they're even more terrified of what might happen if they don't talk to us." The alien delegation had chosen to meet on the space station, seemingly confident that their environmental suits could protect them from the dangerous humans. As Chen watched their ship approach, its crystalline structure catching the sunlight, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. The aliens needed protective gear just to exist in what humans considered normal conditions. The delegation consisted of 3 species. The archivists, who had built the Mars database, were tall, willowy beings with iridescent skin that seemed to flow like liquid crystal. The Nexus, a species that resembled floating jellyfish with multiple tentacular appendages, had apparently coordinated the quarantine. The third species, the Meridians, looked almost like centaurs made of living metal, their bodies clearly adapted for low-gravity environments. "We appreciate you agreeing to this dialogue," the archivist representative began, their translated voice carrying undertones of barely controlled anxiety. "Though we must insist that you maintain a distance of at least 3 meters. Of course," Harris replied smoothly. "We understand our physical capabilities might seem alarming to you. We hope this meeting can help address some of your concerns." The Nexus representative floated forward, their tentacles writhing in what the translation software identified as a gesture of extreme agitation. "Concerns? You are an impossibility. Your species should not exist. Do you understand that your basic biological functions qualify as weapons under galactic law?" Chen exchanged glances with Harris. They had expected resistance, but this level of fear was surprising. "Perhaps you could elaborate on these concerns," she asked carefully. The Meridians stepped forward, their metallic form catching the station's lights. "Your endurance alone qualifies you as pursuit predators. Your thermal regulation allows you to survive temperature ranges that would kill most species. Your bones knit themselves back together after breaking. You can survive partial organ failure. You can defeat most poisons by simply tolerating them until they no longer affect you. You call it building immunity. We call it biological nightmare. And those are just your physical traits," the archivist added. "Your psychological profile is even more disturbing. You seek out dangerous situations voluntarily. You deliberately expose yourselves to hostile conditions to adapt to them. You view challenges not as threats, but as opportunities. The Coalition has never encountered a species like yours," the Nexus continued. "Most intelligent life evolves in safe, stable environments. Their intelligence develops as a way to avoid danger. Your intelligence developed alongside your predatory traits, making you something entirely new." Chen stepped forward, careful to maintain the agreed-upon distance. "But surely you can see that these traits don't make us inherently dangerous to other species. We've developed art, music, literature. We value peace and cooperation." "Yes," the Meridian replied, their metallic form shifting uneasily. "That is perhaps the most terrifying part. You are capable of both extreme violence and extreme creativity. You can be both savagely practical and wildly imaginative. It makes you unpredictable." The meeting continued for hours as the alien delegation listed more concerning human traits: their ability to form social bonds with other species, their habit of anthropomorphizing inanimate objects, their tendency to rescue and care for animals that should be their prey, their capacity to adapt and integrate technology with their biology. Finally, Harris raised his hand to interrupt another list of human violations of biological norms. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice firm but diplomatic. "We understand your fears, but we are not going to stop being human. We cannot change what we are. The question is, can we find a way to coexist?" The aliens conferred among themselves, their various forms of communication creating a strange symphony of movement and light. Finally, the archivist turned back to the human delegation. "We have reviewed the historical data from your Mars facility. We know you now understand why we consider you dangerous. But we also recognize that isolation may not be the answer. Your species has something we've never seen before: the ability to thrive on challenges that would destroy others. Perhaps that could be valuable." "What are you suggesting?" Chen asked. "A compromise," the Nexus replied. "We will maintain the quarantine for now, but we propose establishing a communication channel. There are situations in our galaxy that our species cannot handle, situations that might require human qualities." As Chen looked out at the alien ships surrounding Earth, she realized they had reached a turning point. Humanity was still caged, but they had just been offered a key. Their very dangerous nature might become their greatest asset. "We accept," Harris said, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Though I should warn you, once humans are given a challenge, we tend to exceed expectations." The aliens' various environmental suits registered spikes in their occupants' vital signs. They had just made a deal with the creatures they feared most in the galaxy. But as they returned to their ship, Chen couldn't help but notice they seemed more curious than terrified. Humanity's prison might just become their proving ground. The emergency alert came 6 months after the diplomatic meeting. Dr. Sarah Chen was reviewing data from the Mars facility when her screen suddenly lit up with urgent transmissions from the quarantine fleet. "Director Harris," she called, already rushing to the command center. "The Nexus are broadcasting on all frequencies. Something's wrong." The message was brief but desperate. A research station in a nearby star system had gone dark. The station, jointly operated by several Coalition species, had been studying an unusual stellar phenomenon. Now it was trapped in the gravity well of a dying star, with 300 civilian researchers on board. Their ships can't get close enough, Chen explained during the emergency briefing. The radiation levels are too high, and the gravitational forces are beyond their structural tolerances. They're asking for our help. Harris studied the data scrolling across his screen. Because we're the Deathworlders, he said quietly. The monsters who can survive what kills them. The decision was unanimous. Within hours, the experimental ship Horizon, designed using a combination of human and recovered alien technology, was preparing for launch. Its crew, led by Captain Maya Rodriguez, had been training for deep space missions that might never have been approved under the quarantine. The Coalition's given us a corridor through the quarantine line, Rodriguez reported from the Horizon's bridge. They're calling this a test of our cooperative potential. Chen watched from mission control as the Horizon cut through space, its hybrid engines pushing it to speeds that made the alien observers deeply uncomfortable. Humans hadn't just adapted the alien technology. They'd improved it, pushing its limits in ways the original designers had never dared to try. The situation at the research station was worse than expected. The dying star was entering its final phase, its outer layers pulsing with deadly radiation. The station's shields were failing, and its orbit was degrading faster than predicted. Their environmental systems are critical, Rodriguez reported, her voice steady despite the gravitational forces straining against the Horizon's hull. Most of the researchers are already unconscious. Their bodies can't handle these conditions. Can you get them out? Harris asked, knowing they were pushing against impossible odds. But then, humans specialized in impossible. We're going to have to do this the hard way, Rodriguez replied. Dr. Chen, I need you to coordinate with the Coalition ships. We're going to transfer the researchers directly through space. It was a plan that horrified the watching alien fleet. The idea of exposing themselves to open space, even in protective suits, was almost unthinkable to them. But they had no choice. The rescue operation was unlike anything attempted in galactic history. Human crew members, protected by suits that were considered impossibly crude by Coalition standards, physically carried unconscious alien researchers across open space. They worked in shifts, their bodies straining against radiation that would have killed most species, their enhanced muscles fighting gravitational forces that should have torn them apart. How are they still functioning? The archivist observer asked in disbelief, watching the footage. Those radiation levels. We'll deal with it later, Chen replied, knowing the human crew would face weeks of medical treatment. But they'd survive. They always survived. The final group of researchers was evacuated just as the station's orbit began to collapse. The Horizon, pushing its engines far beyond their rated capacity, broke free of the dying star's grasp with less than a minute to spare. In the aftermath, as the human crew received medical treatment for radiation exposure and gravitational stress, the Coalition representatives gathered for an emergency session. They had just witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of what was possible. You didn't just rescue them, the Nexus representative said during the debriefing. You did it in a way we had deemed impossible. Your crew voluntarily exposed themselves to conditions we consider unsurvivable. That's what humans do, Harris replied simply. We see people in danger, we help. The cost to ourselves is secondary. Perhaps, the Meridian added, their metallic form shifting thoughtfully. We have been looking at your species' traits from the wrong perspective. What we saw as weapons might actually be tools. Tools that could benefit the entire galaxy. Chen looked at the medical bay footage, showing human crew members already recovering, their bodies adapting to and healing from conditions that should have killed them. The aliens were right to be afraid, she realized. Humans were terrifying by their standards. But maybe, just maybe, being terrifying wasn't always a bad thing. We'd like to propose a modification to the quarantine agreement, the archivist announced. Your species has demonstrated that your unique capabilities can be invaluable in certain situations. We propose establishing a formal emergency response protocol, with human teams stationed at key points throughout Coalition space. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was a start. Humanity's prison was becoming a launching pad, their very nature as Deathworlders transforming from a curse into a blessing. As Chen looked at the footage of the rescue one more time, she smiled. Humans hadn't changed. They were still the same terrifying creatures that had frightened the Coalition. But sometimes, she realized, the galaxy needed a monster on its side. 1 year after the stellar rescue mission, the view from Earth had changed dramatically. The quarantine fleet remained, but it had transformed from a prison guard into something more akin to a security detail. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the new Galactic Cooperation Center in Geneva, watching as ships from various Coalition species moved through designated corridors in Earth's space. The latest emergency response team just returned from the Meridian sector, Director Harris reported, looking considerably less stressed than he had a year ago. They managed to stabilize a quantum reactor that the Coalition engineers couldn't even approach. The Meridians are calling it a miracle. Not a miracle, Chen corrected with a slight smile. Just humans being humans. The past year had seen a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed Earth and its inhabitants. Human emergency response teams have been deployed to handle situations that other species simply couldn't survive. They'd rescued researchers from extreme environments, repaired facilities in lethal conditions, and even helped contain a runaway biological experiment that other species couldn't get near. The archivists sent another update to their database, Chen said, pulling up the latest transmission. They've created an entirely new classification system just for us. We're no longer listed as a quarantine species. The new classification read, Humanity, Adaptive Crisis Response Species. Warning, extreme capability ratings in all survival categories. Note, essential allies for extreme condition operations. The change hadn't been easy. Many Coalition species still found humans unsettling, and some remained convinced that allowing humans into the wider galaxy was a mistake. But results were hard to argue with, and humans had proven themselves time and time again. The Nexus delegation is ready, Harris announced. This is the moment we've been working toward. Chen followed him to the main conference room, where representatives from all major Coalition species had gathered. The Nexus speaker, their tentacles now moving in what humans had learned to recognize as excitement rather than fear, activated the central display. We have reviewed the past year's data, they began. Your species has responded to 27 major crisis situations, all of which were deemed unsurvivable by Coalition standards. You have saved thousands of lives and prevented catastrophic damage to multiple facilities. More importantly, you have demonstrated something we did not expect. What's that? Harris asked, though his smile suggested he already knew. Control, the archivist representative answered. Your species possesses capabilities that terrify us, yet you use them with remarkable restraint. You are predators who choose to protect, warriors who prefer to save lives rather than take them. It is unprecedented. The Meridian representative stepped forward, their metallic form gleaming under the conference room lights. We have come to understand that what makes humans dangerous is also what makes them invaluable. Your very adaptability, which we once feared, has become your greatest contribution to galactic society. Therefore, the Nexus continued, we are officially proposing the dissolution of the quarantine protocol. In its place, we suggest establishing Earth as a designated crisis response center for the galaxy. Your species' natural abilities, combined with your technological innovations, make you uniquely suited for this role. The room erupted in discussion. This wasn't just an end to the quarantine. It was an acknowledgement of humanity's place in the galaxy. Not as monsters to be feared, but as guardians to be called upon when all other options failed. There is one condition, the archivist added once the excitement had died down. We request that human emergency teams be accompanied by Coalition observers, not to monitor you as before, but to learn from you. Your ability to adapt, to face challenges that would break other species, these are traits that perhaps we could learn to develop ourselves to a lesser degree. Chen looked at Harris, who nodded. "We accept," she said. "Though I should warn you, learning from humans can be an extreme sport in itself." The joke, translated through the coalition systems, caused a ripple of what humans had learned to recognize as alien laughter. The tension that had permeated these meetings for so long had finally broken. Later that night, Chen stood at her favorite observation point, watching Earth's lights blend with the glitter of alien ships. A year ago, those ships had been guards keeping humanity contained. Now they were partners, allies, and increasingly, students. "We haven't changed," she mused to Harris, who had joined her at the window. "We're still the same Deathworlders who terrify them at first contact. We still break their biological rules just by existing." "No," Harris agreed. "We haven't changed, but their understanding of us has. They've learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room can also be the greatest protector." As if to emphasize his point, an alert flashed across their screens. Another crisis, another call for human assistance. Without hesitation, Chen was already moving to coordinate the response. This was who they were now, the monsters who guarded the galaxy, the predators who chose to protect, the Deathworlders who had turned their curse into a blessing. The stars no longer feared humanity's darkness. They had learned to be grateful for it.